my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so that means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Flying solo on today's show. I am still recovering from traveling and just like hitting the ground running, DJing, both the nights of the weekend that I came back and flying in on a red eye and just trying to get my life together, y'all. I am out here. Yesterday, I will say, just quick little, insight into my life. Yesterday, I did go out and just went bike riding. It was a beautiful day here in New Jersey. I hopped on my bike and I went riding around my old city with a friend. So we just got to get out in nature, and it was really nice to just be able to kind of disconnect a little bit and exercise and enjoy the luxuries of life. I've been pondering on a lot of things, and that's not about today's episode, but just in general, just something I want to touch on. I'll probably post on like social media to kind of, scratch this itch, if you will, that I have about this topic. But I was just like riding my bike. We were in the park, and there's a view of New York City from this park. And I'm like, man, how lucky am I on a Wednesday afternoon? I'm out here getting to experience this beautiful day with a friend of mine and getting some fresh air, looking at this beautiful view, and just enjoying the fruits of life, essentially, right? And I think what I begun to realize about goals and my career and all these different things, it's not about the job titles, the accolades, the money, the houses, all these different things. Instead, I think the focus is, what type of life do I want to live? What type of luxury do I want? For me, I want to be able to, on a Wednesday afternoon, if I choose to, close up shop and just go ride bikes and enjoy the weather. And then it's, how do you make everything around you work with that idea of what your lifestyle should be or what you want it to be, right? And I'm still kind of like clarifying what that, means in being able to articulate it. But, I think this is where we go wrong with like kids, where it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It should be, what do you want your life to look like when you're older? And then from there, we can sort of plug and play whatever might make sense for you, what job title, what type of job, what job arrangement, whatever it might be, gives you the ability to live out the ideal lifestyle, right? But too often we base our lives around these goals, around this job title, around this project that we want to complete, and we're forgetting that all of those things are merely tools, or should be tools, to allow us to live the type of life that we want at the end of the day. So just some food for thought. I know it's Thursday Trends. I'll probably do a full episode on this at some point in time if this is sort of resonating with anybody. But just some things I've been thinking about as I begin to ponder what's next, right? The inevitable question of what's next. Anyway, back to Thursday Trends. We're going to touch on some things here. I'm happy to report that we have equal number of negative and positive stories, or serious and positive stories. So we will talk a bit about what's happening with marijuana, the wacky tobacco in this country, and the restrictions that are potentially going to be eased up as far as classifications go of the marijuana. We'll also talk about missing children and the disproportionate amount of Latino children missing in comparison to other ethnicities. On the positive side of things, Lion King got themselves a Latino musical composer, which is amazing, 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 legendary stuff. And also, man, when you talk about people, putting their money where their mouth is, you have this amazing young woman, this young Latina, of course, who is not just talking about it, but being about it when addressing air pollution in California. So we'll touch on that. But first, as we always do, let's start with the nonsense, the BS, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, let's start talking about the Mary Jane, right? Let's talk about that marijuana, all right, for all my fans of weed, of pot, whatever the kids are calling it these days. Personally, it's never been my thing, but I also am not somebody who's like, just because it's not my thing, I think it should be illegal for all. I think it's a fair argument that it's no worse than alcohol, essentially. And there is, I think I support a lot of reform around it, even though it's not my thing. I'm not, participating in the extracurricular activities around it. I do think that it has sort of, because of racism and the war on drugs, which was very racist, it did get a unfair rap, right? And we are seeing a lot of reform around it these days, which is much needed. So you have the U.S. Being poised to ease restrictions on marijuana in a historic shift. Now, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration will move to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. The Associated Press has learned that a historic shift into generations of American drug policy that could have wide ripple effects across the country. Of course, I'm getting this from the Associated Press. The proposal, which still must be reviewed by the White House Office of Management and Budget, would recognize the medical uses of cannabis and acknowledge it has less potential for abuse than some of the nation's most dangerous drugs. However, it would not legalize marijuana outright for recreational use. Once the OMB signs off, the DEA will take public comment on the plan to move marijuana from its current classification as a Schedule I drug alongside things like heroin and LSD, which is absolutely wild. That's why reform is needed. I think even if you are not a proponent for marijuana use, I think we all could agree that it is not deserving of being held up alongside things like heroin and LSD. Now, the proposal would move pot to a Schedule III alongside things like ketamine and anabolic steroids, following a recommendation from the Federal Health and Human Services Department. After the public comment period and a review by an administrative judge, the agency would eventually publish the final rule. It comes after President Joe Biden has called for a review of federal marijuana law in October 2022 and moved to pardon thousands of Americans convicted federally of simple possession of the drug. He has also called on governors and local leaders to take similar steps to erase marijuana convictions. Quote, criminal records for marijuana and possession have imposed needless barriers to employment, housing, and educational opportunities, Biden said in December. Too many lives have been upended because of our failed approach to marijuana. It's time that we right these wrongs. So, positive stuff here. Again, and also, the cannabis industry is like a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think even if, let's just go pure capitalist, baby. Let's go pure American dream here, right? A lot of money is being left on the table by this shit just not being legal nationwide, essentially, right? And I'm in New Jersey. There are dispensaries popping up all over the place, lines out the door where they open. Like, it's big business. Like, there's money to be made here that then helps the state, helps the country as a whole. Obviously, there's questions about the people being given these licenses to open these dispensaries, right? And it not going to the people who have been disproportionately affected by the over-policing of marijuana, Black community specifically. And I think that's a very fair topic of conversation to continue to have. But in general, it's been a positive, I think, experience in easing these restrictions and opening it up to public consumption. Again, this is money to be made for the states that already have begun to legalize it, be it for recreational or medicinal, whatever it might be. And also, I think in terms of like the election that's coming up and things like that, we also have to look to stuff like this. I mean, communities of color, when asking what has Biden done for us, and obviously there's so much more that could be done. I think there's been a lack of police reform that had been promised and all things like that. But, the man did pardon thousands of people who were, arrested on petty marijuana offenses, basically, right? And you have to look at that as a positive. And also him calling for reform, again, has to be a positive. I think, again, even if you are not somebody who is a proponent of weed or drugs or whatever it might be. I think we all could agree again that heroin and LSD are far more heavy drugs than marijuana, and they shouldn't even be said in the same sentence, And I think we're moving in a good direction when it comes to stuff like this. Also, when it comes to crime, it's like when stuff like this is illegal, and so many people participate in it, be it illegal or legal, you have a criminal element that evolves within it, right? And now you have people putting themselves in harm's way to obtain these things, right? Or potentially buying it from shady practitioners of drug sales, and that adds a criminal element that could be eradicated if weed was just made more accessible for those who want to partake in it. And again, like I don't fuck with it, but it's not my thing. But I drink, and I've smoked before, and I could honestly say, like, yeah, me being piss drunk is just as bad, if not worse, than me being stoned, as far as my functionality. And if liquor is going to be legal and accepted widely socially, I believe the same should be for weed and cannabis related, things. So I think this is a good shift in the right direction. I think the fact that we're also having the conversation around prison reform for it, and hopefully further discussion around who's actually going to be given these licenses as we move forward, is another important topic of conversation. But in general, I like where we're going with this personally. I just think that it's long overdue. And again, if you are somebody who is like, but what has Biden done? We can look to these things. I think he's addressing certain issues that many people are passionate about, particularly of a younger generation. So good stuff there. We appreciate it. Now, on to a shocking story that I read on wearemetoo.com. Now, this is what they're calling. I think it's completely appropriate. They said the unseen crisis of missing Latino children in the U.S. And I think it's a perfect way to put it, because after reading it, I'm like, fuck, this is actually a bit scary when you think about it, right? Now, in the article, they talk about how every 40 seconds, a child goes missing in the United States. That means approximately 840,000 children are reported missing each year. And although authorities resolve most reports within hours, many children are still missing today. Most of them are Latino children. Now, this blows my mind. They said, according to a Telemundo News analysis, as of April 4th, 2024, 414 children up to the age of 12 were reported missing in official reports from 2003 to 2023 in the United States. The analysis, based on data from the National Center for Missing and Exposed Children, or NMEC, Latino children led the statistics with 130 reported cases. So out of, 414 cases, 130 of them were Latinos. NMEC figures indicate that approximately 1 out of every 3 children up to the age of 12 reported missing during the past 2 decades are Latino. Quote, in general, we have about 4,500 missing minors in the United States who have active wanted posters on our website. Those are only the cases that we know of. Of that number, around 23% are Hispanic/Latinos. It is certainly a large population that worries us, said John Bischoff, the center's vice president of the Missing Minors Division. Now, to make matters worse, according to Bischoff, the data is not always accurate. According to NMEC, they say that and they're the ones with the most accurate figures, they're saying. Other agencies record ethnicity differently, they're saying. This registration is often optional, as it is not federally mandated but voluntary, right? When you're checking off the box that you are Hispanic, Latino, other, whatever it might be, right? And they say this could explain why there are often discrepancies in the overall number of missing persons in the United States. Quote, collecting data on missing people of color poses numerous problems, Danielle Slackoff, a criminal justice professor at California State University, Sacramento, told Telemundo, saying, in official data sources, Hispanics are often grouped with whites. Missing indigenous people are often misclassified. Whatever the case, the disappearances have patterns in common. As Bischoff continued, although Hispanics represent 19.1% of the U.S. population, they account for 23% of missing children's cases. This implies that missing Latino children exceed the national average, and that is a cause for concern. And they say when explaining the reasons for disappearance, Bischoff assures that the patterns are always the same. The center groups the reports into several sections, including fugitives in danger, family abductions, non-family abductions, and missing, injured, or missing for other reasons. So then the question is, what makes Latino children more vulnerable? As Trent Steele, director of the Anti-Predator Project, told NBC News, the higher incidence of Latino children reported missing has to do with, quote, specific issues plaguing marginalized communities. I think that in the Latino and Black community, the numbers are a little higher because they are affected by situations of poverty and inequity, adding that many are put in situations where they disappear and flee. They're saying similarly, some Latino parents consider the U.S. safer than their home countries and let their children play in the street more freely. That last part was definitely not the case in my upbringing. My mother assumed everybody was a murderer or kidnapper and kept a close eye on us. So I was not playing the street more freely as a kid. That is false for me, but maybe for others. But this is a really interesting conversation. I don't want to make light of it because it really, there's a lot of issues for us within this country and a lot of things because we're not categorized properly, right? The idea of checking boxes that we're indigenous people and all these things, like we don't know where we belong, right? This otherness that has sort of been set up. And I think I've talked about this before in like, when you check at the doctor's office, like, what are you? What's your race? Your ethnicity? Blah, 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 right? And all of that affects the approach that might be taken to remedying situations that are plaguing our community, in a more widespread way. And as they say with this, right, the number is already incredibly high when it comes to missing Latino children in comparison to other groups. But it could be even higher because we're actually not all accounted for as being Latino or Hispanic, right? And I think also the line that really got me in reading this was talking about the specific issues plaguing marginalized communities, right? Saying that Latino and Black communities are affected by situations of poverty and inequity at a higher rate. And this brings me back, and I'm not trying to stir up the fucking pot, or anything like that, but when we talk about the idea of privilege in this country, regardless of where you were brought up, or I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of get to this idea properly here in my head. This is the idea of privilege is that statistically, because of generational racism in this country, we have found ourselves as marginalized communities born into situations that are not the best, to put it lightly, right? When you talk about the idea of poverty and inequity and things like that, right? Not coming from places of money, and therefore oftentimes having to grow up in areas that are crime ridden, right? Where people are in survival mode, crabs in a barrel mentality, which then leads to over policing or just complete lack of policing at all, right? Or police ignoring particular areas the way that they wouldn't if it was one of affluence, right? Or one of white, let's be honest. And then that leads to things like this, where kids are disappearing at higher rates or running away at higher rates, and these sort of cycles of generational trauma begin to continue. And this is where we talk about privilege, right? Because if you're born into a blue-collar town as a white kid, yeah, your parents bust their ass for everything they have, but you're still born into a situation that is miles and miles ahead of a poor Black or Latino kid born in the hood. And your family is also generationally, just from when we talk about migration and opportunities that were given in this country, generationally ahead of marginalized communities like Latino and Black. So even if you struggled, your parents struggled, they worked their ass off for everything they had, being born white was a privilege, regardless. And statistics like this show that. I don't say that to like stir the pot, but I just say it to sort of bring up and further validate what most of us already know, just being born into this community. It saddens me when I look at statistics and numbers like this, and when they blatantly say like, yeah, it's probably because we are more often than not born into very particular circumstances. Man, that's not like an easy problem to fix overnight, right? And that's what's scary or frustrating about it all when you look at this type of stuff. And I also think it's a reminder of why the work is so incredibly important, and even for me, you know, when I think about like, why have I made it my life's work to just be positive and do positive things? And this is the harder route, you're right, of finding success and things like that, and of breaking through the noise. It's because I want to just do my part in breaking this cycle, right? And I'm fortunate that my parents broke the cycle for me, right? Even though my dad didn't grow up with much at all in Puerto Rico, you know, and my mom was in the Bronx, they managed to get themselves out of that and get into a middle-class neighborhood in the suburbs, you know, where I got to spend my formative years for the most part, right? So they broke that cycle. And obviously I'm then building upon that and going to do even better. But it's why, you know, I firmly believe us as members of these communities that they speak about, that traditionally are, you know, born sort of behind our white counterparts, we have to operate with a chip on our shoulder, because there's something larger happening. You know, potentially there is our existence. I don't want to say it has more meaning, but we're born with a certain burden on our shoulder, whether we like it or not. And maybe it's fair, it's not fair, whatever the case may be. But personally, I'm like, okay, I have to do better, not only for myself, not only for my family, but also for the next generation of people who look like me, so that they can potentially have a better life, even in some sort of small way, beyond like platforms of podcasting and blah, blah, blah. Even me just being a business owner who then potentially can hire somebody from my community and inspire them in some sort of way to like, hey, this guy started a business, now I can start a business. Like all those little things, right? That's why I talk about conscious living and the whole thing with the Just Be Social. It's like intentionality. I really, you know, and I get to arguments. Okay, I'm bouncing around here, but I think about an argument I was just having, or a heated conversation with a friend of mine when I was in Puerto Rico, and we were talking about like the Bad Bunnies of the world. How I'm like, man, they should be doing more with the privilege that they have, and not that they aren't already, but there's so much more they could be doing with the money and access they have. And her argument is, oh, well, that's not fair to put on them. They didn't sign up for that. And my whole thing is, yeah, you didn't sign up for it, but unfortunately you were born into it. And you've been blessed with the gift of talent, attention, money, and access now. And regardless if you signed up for it or not, morally, if you are a person who gives a shit about anything other than yourself, you should feel it to be your duty to do something in your power, or do all that you can that's within your power, within reason, to help out your community and the world around you. And this goes back to like, and I'm fucking just going off on a tangent, so I apologize. I know I was giving you a story about missing children, but to me, this goes back to like tribe native mentality, which was incredibly healthy, where it was like everybody sort of had a role. And as the hunters, you weren't just hunting for yourself to eat or your children, your companion. You guys were hunting for the entire tribe as a whole, right? It was like this communal feast that was happening essentially, right? And it was because you knew that you were all playing a role, playing a part, and you're all united within nature essentially, right? And what's good for everyone else is good for you, right? It's this importance of like, I want everybody to be happy and flourishing essentially, right? I don't want just my belly to be filled, but it's important for my neighbor's belly to be filled, right? I just saw a TikTok the other day where a woman was reading the people's history of the United States, and they were mentioning Columbus, and how Columbus in his journal wrote as a negative how the natives were so inclined to give him and his people whatever they asked for. They were so happy to share all that they had. And he was like making fun of them as how naive they were. I believe he even called them the perfect slave because of this. And that's the fucked up, like, sick European mentality that I think was the poisonous seed for the society that we live in today. The idea that somebody wanting to build and give and essentially nourish their community around them and be so open to giving the shirt off their back to someone who might be in need or want, the fact that that is a negative and to be looked down upon is like the poisonous seed that has us in this sort of very selfish existence that we live in as a society. And I know I just got off on a complete, like, kind of tangent on all we talk about, but yeah, I mean, I read, again, kind of, all right, we'll bring it back full circle. I read articles like this one, and when there's a direct correlation to the fact that we are consistently generationally born into poverty essentially, or dire circumstances, I can't help but feel like, how do I do my part to try and alleviate some of that? And I share that in hopes that we all begin to adapt that sort of mindset, because I think that's what so much of our lack of fulfillment and happiness comes from, like this lack of companionship, because we're not living in accordance with like nature, right? We think we're the center of the universe, us and like our immediate family or whatever it might be. And I was reading this book that has like the writings of the philosopher Nietzsche, or Nietzsche, however you pronounce it, and his sort of a thing that he pointed out that really like stuck out to me was like, we as human beings, we don't live in accordance with nature because we think we're the center of the universe. And then he said, ironically, the mosquito also thinks that it's the center of the universe, or the fly. The fly doesn't give a shit that you're out at the, at the cookout having your backyard barbecue, and you don't want it laying its nasty ass eggs all over your food as you're trying to eat, or you don't want it flying in your face. But the fly, to itself, it's got its own agenda, right? It's trying to fuck around and find out what that, churrasco tastes like. And I think that's sort of, what we have to begin to adapt is a mentality of like, we're all coexisting on this thing together. None of us is more important than the other one. And we all should be looking around each and every day of thinking, how do I make my immediate surroundings or the greater good just slightly better each day? Be it the way I treat those around me, be it the way that I spend my time or my energy, my resources, volunteering, whatever it might be. But like, I really think that that's far more the key to like happiness and building a beautiful world, is sort of recognizing the fact that we can never have a truly happy and fulfilled society if there's still large, widespread suffering happening amongst our fellow brothers and sisters of this world, our fellow co-inhabitants of this world, right? Or when it comes to animals and the earth, and we're going to get into a story like that. We need clean air to breathe at the end of the day, right? And it's the irony, like, think about how fucked up that is, right? We have literally prophesized and made this thing called money to have like this godlike level that we're literally willing to kill ourselves little by little each day as a means to being able to create more money, right? We've created industries that pollute and continue to support and fight for gasoline and things like that to continue to exist, even though it's proven to be something that's contributing to like our death each day, where our breathing is getting worse. We've got all types of fucked up chemicals in our lungs, probably, right? Or the food industry is like feeding us garbage. But again, it's the idea that we've purposed money as the highest thing to like value over human life. As a whole, we've done that. Same argument like guns and shit. It's our right as Americans. Bro, as human beings, why the fuck would we want to create and fight for and obtain something and give it to anybody that literally has the power to take life? Life is the utmost thing we should be fucking like worshiping and embracing and celebrating. Yet again, we go against all of like rationale as human beings and support these sort of false idols. And I just got all over the place on this conversation. This is kind of where my head is at. I think I was alluding to it at the beginning of the podcast. I'll have to do a full episode to get this off my chest completely. But yeah, I just think we all need to begin to have a bit of a come to Jesus moment about like the way we view things in this life, what we're valuing, the idea of maybe a little bit less, or the idea of what's truly important, and letting that be the thing that we sort of lead ourselves down our path, right? Let that be the light that leads us down the dark path of this life, right? Yeah, just some food for thought. I'm just throwing some shit out there and seeing if it makes anybody else think like I've been thinking. But again, like, I remind myself of all of this to keep the fucking like blinders on, like let everybody else, drive the fancy car, let everybody else get the gigantic house or the fame, whatever it might be. Like, let your prize be intentionality, living with intention, living consciously, and knowing that you are being a positive contributor to this world and this community as a whole, right? This tribe that we are as just human beings, right? And trying our best to honor the nature around it that keeps us breathing and energized and nourished and all of these things, right? Just recognizing what's important and understanding that it is your job to do something, to be a contributor, to be better, because you are a part of a ecosystem, and each member of the ecosystem has to do something, right? Last thing I'll say on that topic, because now I'm stewing. You think about like bees. I have a rational fear of bees. Hate bees. But bees have a purpose, right? They pollinate, right? It's like all these different animals and insects that scare us or whatever. They're all a part of a larger ecosystem that without them, we would notice a drastic difference in a negative aspect, right? It's like in Puerto Rico, I went on this tour of the caves like a while back, and they talk about how Puerto Rico's coffee industry has suffered post-Hurricane Maria because many of the bats were killed during that time period. And the bats actually like nourish the coffee plant. I think it's with their dump. I hate to like be crass or be disgusting and make you think about that whenever you drink coffee. But the bats in some way contribute to that. And because there's been less bats, there have been less harvesting of coffee beans because there haven't been as many, growing essentially, right? I'm not an expert on this, so I apologize if I fuck up the terminology, but you get what I'm saying. That little example right there shows you that each member of nature is contributing in their own way. And we as human beings are like the only ones who think that it's just our job to take. And we refuse to realize that we're actually a part of a larger system and that we have a purpose to fulfill, whether we like it or not. Whether we want to be selfish or not, we're going against nature by not trying to positively make a contribution to this ecosystem that we are all a part of just by being born. I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm still trying to figure this out, y'all. I'll leave it at that. I'll do a whole podcast episode on this. But when I'm speaking to you, I'm not speaking to you holier than thou. I don't fucking volunteer enough. I don't do enough of this shit. Like, I'm literally just beginning to come to a realization of like, bro, the beautiful house that you have, imagine that you want to live in. Awesome. If it happens, amazing. I hope it does. I think it will. But that's just like a little side effect of you just living a positive life in accordance with nature, right? That is literally a blip on the radar here. That can't be the thing that determines your decisions in this life, right? Because in order to get that house, I have to have a bigger check. So to get a bigger check, I got to work another job. That job might pay me more, but it also might have nothing to do with being a positive contributing member to society. Yet I'm going to spend, 40 hours a week doing that? Doesn't really make sense. And again, we're all in different situations. There's levels of privilege that I'm speaking of here. But I think what I'm saying from like as a child, that should be the mentality of like, no, what is the lifestyle you want? What is the contribution you want to make to this society? Then what job or what experiences will contribute to you living out that lifestyle? I'm really bouncing all over the place. So I will pause it, table it here, because this will become a whole different kind of episode than Thursday Trends. But this is where my head is at. These are the conversations I'm beginning to have with myself and anybody who will listen. And just questioning my existence, questioning the goals that I've set for myself, and questioning my definition of happiness at the end of the day. And yeah, that's that. I don't know how I got to that from Missing Latino Children, but yeah, we're here. This is a part of the conversation. Listen, if you've stuck through that, I appreciate you. I don't know. Hit me up. I want to have these conversations. Maybe this is something we could do, like, as we begin to open up the Just Be Social Club. I want to like be able to like really have a rapport and a back and forth within, like, going back and forth with comments and messaging and things like that. I'm trying to open that up and see how it goes, because I just want to keep sharing ideas like this. And I know there are a lot of people listening to this who probably are volunteering or doing community work. I mean, shit, my business partner Brenda is doing so much amazing community organizing in her region and like being an advocate for the natives of that region. And like that's fucking living in accordance with nature right there. Ingratiating yourself in the community and being a part of it and being somebody who's taking action on things that are important that would, continue to uplift the community and would continue to have positive effects for generations to come, right? Working with children, like all those things. And like that to me is like, oh, that is very much in line with how she views her life. And then basically she got a job that allows her to do that, right? And there's going to be more and more opportunities for her down the line. But these are the things I'm talking about, and that's why I love meeting different people and having conversations, because like, I put me onto something I don't even know existed, right? I didn't even know about community organizing until I met her in that way. Yeah, just sharing ideas here. That bike ride really did a number on me and like allowed me to just release a lot of energy and get a lot of clarity. So I apologize, I'm dumping it all onto you for listening right now, but that's where we are. Now, let's move on to our positive side of the podcast. Mi gente segment. Mi gente. All right, so I'm going to talk about two topics here today that are very positive, that are amazing. I kind of alluded to this one, but you have this incredible Latina activist by the name of Andrea Vidaguirre, I think is her name. And she wins the Green Nobel, which I guess is like the Nobel Prize but for green. And she's trying to protect the Southern California's Latino community from air pollution, right? So she's an activist. She won an award that recognizes people on 6 continents who take, quote, extraordinary actions to protect the planet. Now, if you're talking about living in accordance with nature, this is the ultimate thing. Like somebody who's really putting their money where their mouth is, something I need to start doing more of, right? And she was actually raised in California's Inland Empire, which is a region that's like an hour east of Los Angeles. It actually has some of the worst air quality in the entire country. And a lot of this is caused by the industries there, right? They're saying in 1980, there were about 234 warehouses in the Inland Empire. Today, there are more than 4,000. And they're saying that this has radically transformed the quality of life for communities of color who mostly inhabit those areas. And this is what it was like really alluding to. I mean, think about this, man. Like, and first of all, the people that are really profiting from this are not living in those areas and experiencing that horrendous air quality, right? But they're saying that there's been many studies that the diesel exhaust has contributed to worsening air quality. And they're saying, quote, "We're breathing these toxic chemicals every single day," as Andrea said to NBC News. More people being exposed to it because there has been so much encroachment and expansion of warehousing. And on one hand, yes, it has created more jobs, right? People are able to work and make money. Cool. That's important. We all need that in this life. But this is what my point kind of has been for it as well, is the fact that we are literally choosing money over human existence, over somebody's quality of life, over your ability to breathe clean, fresh air. It's like, listen, you either want a paycheck or you're going to complain about breathing in these chemicals. That's like, well, you know what? In the world we live in today, I got to make this paycheck. Let me breathe in some toxins, right? And this is sort of the mentality, I feel like, that is a great example of much of what we've adapted as a society, you know, is really choosing so much bullshit over what should actually be important to us and what we should be valuing, which is human life itself, right? And that's why I'm bringing up this article, because I salute people like her who have really been, you know, who are taking it upon themselves and making this their life's work. And, you know, she just won this award that I believe they give her $200,000. I'm sure much of that is going to end up going back into the organization. But this is like, you know, not work that's going to get her fucking famous or get her rich, right? But it's going to create a change for her community in some sort of way, right? And they even had their first victory. It says the program that she started had their first victory in 2023, where the People's Collective for Environmental Justice succeeded in getting California state officials to adopt 2 transportation regulations to limit transportation emissions. And they're saying they're also trying to create a path to 100% zero emissions for freight truck sales by 2036. So this is important work that will potentially change generations to come who might be living in that area, you know, helping them have a higher quality of life. Like we talk about living in accordance with nature. This is what the fuck it is, man. I don't know. I'm so hyped up on that fucking phrase right now. I really think, yeah, Nietzsche fucked me up when you talked about the mosquito thing and like just the idea like we're all just coexisting here. Nobody's more important than the other one, right? But this is why the work is so important. This is why, like, regardless of what selfish society has told you, like, oh, it's not your job to do these things. You are a member of this ecosystem, whether you want to admit it or not. You were born into this world. You're a member of a larger ecosystem. And being a member, you have a contribution to make, right? And you can either be a shitty member of the ecosystem or you can be a positive one, right? And that's really what it comes down to. That choice is yours at the end of the day. And I would hope more people than not begin to start choosing to be a positive contributor to that once you recognize that we are all a part of this, whether we want to admit it or not, and we all have some sort of effect. And why would you want your effect to be a negative one when you could easily make it a positive one, right? And if we begin to change our value systems, like, I don't know what her financial situation is. I hope she becomes the richest person in the world, continue to do this work, right? But what a blessing it would be if she can do this work and keep getting these grants that allow her to at least have a comfortable way of living where her needs are met and her quality of life is good, but knowing that she's doing amazing work that is bigger than just herself. Like, that's the fucking goal at the end of the day, man. So, beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff right there. And on to something that maybe feels a little bit less important, which it kind of is, but it's still incredible. You have Lin-Manuel Miranda as the new person behind the music for Disney's Mufasa, The Lion King, the new movie that is coming out. He's actually going to be writing all of the original songs on here. And the film is being directed by Barry Jenkins, who's an Oscar winner. Cast includes Donald Glover as Simba, Beyonce as Nala, Seth Rogen as Pumbaa, and Billy Eichner as Timon. I also believe Blue Ivy is going to be playing a character in it. But also, somebody pointed this out online. This means that Beyonce and Lin-Manuel Miranda are going to be collaborating on music as a part of this. And this is incredible for Latinos, right? I think it pushes the boundaries of what we're capable of doing in this life, you know? And I know Lin-Manuel Miranda has used his voice for, things outside of entertainment to help uplift the community, which is a beautiful thing. Again, like, I celebrate this because this is a vessel, this is a platform, right? Him having this voice, being this successful, allows him then to hopefully pass the baton back down and help other people out and be an activist and do all these different things, right? So I don't shun anybody who is taking this path, right? His gift is his gift, and his gift has allowed him to exist within, like, the matrix, if you will, right? Within the world of entertainment, within art and things like that. And as a result, it now allows him to create a vehicle of change because he has the connections, he has the finances to do so, right? That's what the goal is, you know? And that is, again, if I think about my mindset and resetting it and all these different things, it's like, okay, understanding that it's like, if I'm blessed enough to get into a position where I'm incredibly wealthy, it's not the goal. It's not like, okay, awesome. That means now I finally get to get this house. Life is fulfilled. No. Yeah, I want to be able to get the house, but more than the house, I want to be able to say that life is now opening itself up to me being able to be an advocate for change at the end of the day. And that is bigger than anything else, and that is the end-all, be-all goal, I think, in this life. And what I'm beginning to come to grips with and come to terms with at the end of the day is that's the main focus or the main reason for me wanting to find any sort of monetary success in this life, is because of what it's going to make me capable of doing when it comes to creating lasting change for this world and specifically for my community as a whole. And I'm fucking, I know I'm bouncing around thoughts, ideas, this and that. I'm literally just here, like, I'm processing this all, in clarity and things like that in real time. This is why I love doing this podcast. It's like my fucking journal. But just amazing stuff. Salute to these people, Lin-Manuel Miranda, as well as Andrea Vidayure for all their work that they're doing. Positive stuff here on our Mi Gente segment. Love to see it. Now, with that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment called Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so we touched on so much today that I feel like has zero to do with Thursday Trends. We got super existential. I appreciate you coming along for the ride with me. And I'm just trying to find a place to focus this fucking energy, like, because I don't know, man. I think I'm about to go on another fucking tangent. I just think as you get older, or I've been lucky enough to get close to the success that I thought was what I wanted, or be in proximity to people who had said success. And the closer I get to it, the more I realize I really am not interested in 90% of the things that I thought I was actually interested in. Right? And the more I unplug from the constant grind and hustle of everything, the more I recognize how much happiness lies outside of that. And I'm in, like, a very much reevaluation period of my life. So maybe the podcast takes weird turns this season, right? This is where I'm at, where I'm really like, all right, you've gone 100 miles an hour for the last 10 years and you've achieved a hell of a lot. But, like, what do you really want? Like, what is this evolved version of you want? I've done the fucking VIP treatment in Vegas, where it's like, oh my God, nothing's off limits. I've made, more money than my parents. I've lost and spent more money than my parents. I've done all these stupid things. I've driven the fucking BMW. I've done, I've hung out with the celebrities. I've done all the superficial shit that I was chasing after. And instead of trying to one up it, thinking that it's just I haven't achieved a next level of superficial shit, I'm now like, oh, actually, let's strip some shit away instead of adding more shit on. And let's really get down to, like, what makes you happy, what energizes you in a real fucking way. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm, like, reevaluating everything, reevaluating my place in this world, right? And, like, really recognizing, like, what do I want to be known for, or really feeling passionate about wanting change to happen within my community, and how do I become a vessel for that more than anything else? And how do I stop thinking about success or achieving monetary milestones and instead just give myself the freedom to explore what makes me the most happy and just be a positive member of this ecosystem of life, right? And I think that's where I'm at. That's why we're going on tangents right now, is because I'm like asking those myself those questions and really trying to dig deep into them and make that sort of where my life's focus is, moving forward for now. So yeah, to summarize, that was my summary of the existential crisis you might have just been witnessing via this episode. But also, let's summarize marijuana, the wacky tobacco. Listen, enough with the nonsense. This is something, a drug that is very much judged and policed based upon racism. And I say that as somebody who, if it didn't exist, I wouldn't even notice. Like I had zero interest in it in my everyday life. But I also can admit that the policing of it and the criticism of it and the sort of just like societal judgment of it is too much. Like it's not, doesn't add up for what it is, right? And too many lives have been destroyed over nothing essentially. And reform does need to happen because it logically makes sense, and I love to see that happening. And again, for all the criticism of Biden, there's a lot of things we can go and look at as well. Him pardoning thousands of people and pushing for reform to happen. If this is an issue that is near and dear to your heart, that should speak to you right there. Like, okay, he's not perfect, but he's doing shit that I actually am in support of, and he's trying to contribute in a positive way. There's that. Now, when it comes to the unseen crisis of missing Latino children, it's crazy. It's crazy, but it also is not surprising when you think about it. When they put it in terms of Latino and Black children are born into very much so dire circumstances, oftentimes, statistically speaking. And this is where I got on my tangent of like, how do I become a better member of this community to hopefully over generations alleviate the fact that we are statistically going to be born into dire circumstances that lend themselves to missing children or runaways or violence, right? And, you know, again, it's just important to be aware of these things. And I think this is the beauty of the internet. I was arguing with my dad about this the other day in a different way. I'll get into that in another episode. But we now have the ability to have awareness to a lot of the shit that is going on in this life. And with awareness, we then can actually create change. Now I'm aware of this being an issue, and it adds another sort of fuel to the fire of why the work is so important to uplift our community. And it's a reminder of how important this work is. And that's why it's important to share stories like this one, as much as it scares me to think about. On the positive side of things, again, you have a girl in a part of California doing some work, a part of California that I've never been to, that I'm now able to learn about and be inspired by because of the internet. Right? You have Andrea Vida out here in California creating an organization addressing a problem in her local community. And actually, because of her organizing efforts, creating substantial change, and having things be passed to stop or alleviate the pollution that's happening in that area. And again, this is our duty. I don't think it's like a volunteer thing anymore. It shouldn't be. This is like it's our job as members of this ecosystem. I keep pushing that out there, right? Like that we all have a job to do that is outside of the selfish capitalistic societal European mentality that has been poisoned in us. That's why this world has so many dark corners. That's why so many of us are depressed, anxious, miserable, because we've been led astray and it continues to get worse and worse regarding a mentality of what's supposed to make us happy, when in reality, it only brings us further and further away from leading a complete, healthy, and fulfilled life, right? Again, it's the idea that these corporations are literally run by people, are saying, yeah, I want money so bad, we're okay with poisoning other human beings. We're okay with poisoning our fellow members of this ecosystem because money supersedes human life. That's the world we live in when you really break it down. And that's what I'm trying to correct and think about with these stories. And then again, big shout out to Lin-Manuel Miranda for really now gaining a larger platform, a bigger stage, if you will, to hopefully again be a vehicle for positive change in this world. By having now the ability to create the soundtrack for something as massive as Lion King, just absolutely amazing. Love to see this kind of stuff, and hopefully love to see more of what he's going to be able to do with this platform and the financial aspect that, of course, is going to come along with it. Now, with that said, Just Be Social Club, I talked about this on the last episode. Again, we're doing a friends and family rollout. Little by little, the content's going on there. My other podcast, the Street Stoic Podcast, is actually only going to exclusively be available on the Just Be Social Club. So if you were into that podcast, I'm moving it over there. Hopefully, I'm going to actually be able to do the same thing for other people's podcasts as well. And that's why there's a membership fee monthly because I want to be able to pay people for the work that they do as well. So I want to bring together this entire community. That's the vision and long term. So you want to be a part of the friends and family rollout, DM me at DJ Dramos on Instagram or email Brenda@myneveryounglord.com and we'll send you the link to start getting on board with that. And man, that's it. Have an amazing weekend. Thank you for giving me a place to vent my emotions and frustrations of this life. I'll talk to you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Until then, stay safe. We'll talk soon. Peace.